All right. Hi, welcome everyone. We're really happy that you all have joined us. This is our athletics recruiting webinar, and we've chosen to do it in this virtual format so we can hopefully reach as large of an audience as possible. We try to do this every other year or so, just so we can make sure we hit everybody in the upper school who is interested in it, and actually everybody at school is welcome to come. But in case you didn't know, my name is Tim Williams. I'm the Director of Athletics at USM, and we're very happy that you are here. We've got a fantastic panel that is here that is joining us, and we have Jamie from Marquette University, and we have Steve from Pomona, and we have Rachel from Trinity College, and they are all from the differing parts of the country and also from differing universities at different levels of competition from Division I to Division III, and they can give you a lot of insight on how to go about your recruiting. And even if you just are interested in the possibility of athletics, you're not quite sure if you want to do athletics in college and what the difference between a Division I commitment and a Division III commitment might be. So again, it's going to be great information. We're happy that you're here. And we're also going to record this so we can post it and you can look back on it. And I believe we do have some time at the end for questions. And so I'm going to kick it over to Ivan and let him talk about our program and how that's going to work. So Ivan, take it away.
All right. Hello, everybody. Ivan Guzman, the Assistant Athletic Director and Middle School Athletic Director at USM. If you don't know who I am, we're very excited to be hosting this. There's going to be a lot of really great information coming out from this and posted up afterwards. So some of our objectives for tonight, our main focuses, of course, are going to be, just talking to our panel and getting their perspective from their side, a little bit about, the recruiting process, what that might look like, various platforms and websites that are maybe best practices for you to use, start getting your name out there, different things that you should be thinking about and looking into in order to get this process going for yourself, and having some success within that process. And also just getting a better understanding of everything, getting an understanding of the timeline, and all various factors when it comes to recruiting and getting into that college that you've dreamed about. So those are objectives for tonight, and I'm going to kick it over to Liz.
Thanks so much, Ivan and Tim. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Liz Jackson. I'm the Director of College Guidance at University School of Milwaukee, and actually former college athlete myself. So this is kind of a topic I'm pretty excited about. And before we get started, I just want to say thank you to everyone for spending some time with us tonight, and a huge thank you to our panelists for joining us. And so we've got some questions that we're going to that I'll be asking of the panelists, but if any of you in the audience have questions that you would like for them to address, you're welcome to use the Q&A or the chat, and we will either sort of type a response, or as Mr. Williams said, we'll also have a little bit of time at the end for live Q&A. And so without further ado, I'm hoping that our panelists can each just give us sort of your name, your role at your university, and a little bit about sort of what you do and what your university is like. And so, Jamie, do you mind starting?
Sure. So my name is Jamie McGavert. I am a 1999 graduate of USM. I went to Marquette University for both undergrad and law school. I played on the women's soccer team at Marquette. It is a Division I institution. Played on the women's soccer team at Marquette. Also worked for the women's basketball team as a manager and practice player. And I see Brian Hendricks on here, and he did the same thing. So that's fantastic to see him. So worked with them, went to law school. I also worked in facilities and events while I was in undergrad and law school for Marquette. Left for a hot second to Northern Illinois University, where I was an academic advisor briefly. I had interned for them when I was in law school in the compliance department, came back to Marquette in compliance, and have been there for the last 17 years almost. It seems like a really long time. And I'm the assistant athletic director for compliance at Marquette. And kind of what I do on a day-to-day is the NCAA on each level, Division 1, 2, and 3, has a lot of different rules. My job is to educate the coaches, student athletes, donors, kind of all of our on-campus constituents on what the rules are. We monitor the rules. We're the ones who file violations, kind of investigate if there are any violations of rules and things like that. But having gone through the recruiting experience myself for both Division 1 and Division 3 schools, I'm hoping that I can answer some of your questions and kind of maybe what the difference is and kind of what we look for on the Division 1 level, and hopefully we'll get you guys some answers.
Thank you, Jamie. Steve, do you want to go next?
Sure. Can you hear me now? I'm always bad about not hitting the mute button whenever I'm on these things. So my name's Steve Bickham. I'm the men's tennis coach at Pomona and Pitzer Colleges in California. It's definitely a little warmer here than I think where you guys are right now. I've been here about 10 years. I actually played Division I tennis at New Mexico and also coached for a while at Northern Arizona and Arizona State. So I've been around all the divisions to some extent. To give you a little clue of where we are in Division III, we're five. I don't know if probably in your area you may not know the Claremont Consortium, but there's 5 small colleges here. And then 2 athletic departments divided amongst those 5 colleges. So we have us and Pitzer College, which totally are separate admissions departments and separate everything, but we work together on our tennis team. And then the other 3 colleges are Claremont McKenna, Harvey Mudd, and Scripps. And those go to a different athletic department. So we have a built-in rivalry between our 2 athletic departments, which you may or may not have heard of. It's a unique situation. Kids that go to school here can take classes at all 5 schools, all 5 colleges, and then you get your degree from the college you actually are going to. But so it's kind of a fun place to be. But we, for Division III, we're typically a top 10 program in a lot of our sports. The academic requirements are very high. So for our first step when we're recruiting athletes is to see what their GPA is, what classes they've taken. There's about 90% of the people that want to come here that we have to turn away right away. So it's a lot of our recruiting is taken, the first step's taken by the athlete because they know our requirements. They come to us and say it's something that they would love to be a part of our program. And so then we go out and see how good they are and see if they would fit our athletic program. I'm sure there'll be a ton more questions, but that's kind of a little basic clue on where we are out here.
Thank you so much, Steve. Yeah, and we were got snow yesterday, so we're definitely a little jealous of your location right now. And Rachel, will you give us a little bit of info about you and your school?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Rachel Schrader. I am the head women's soccer coach at Trinity College. We're in Hartford, Connecticut. I've been at Trinity for about 5.5 years. I also, one of my players is who's a current first year freshman. She just graduated from USM. And then funny enough, also my father-in-law went to USM. So I have like these kind of crazy connections to you all, which is pretty cool. And I can tell you a little bit more about the recruiting process with Taylor, who's a current first year. But kind of similar to what Steve said, like a lot of what we do is really like people reach out to us first often, and then we go watch them play. And we'll talk about that more a little bit later, but we play in the NESCAC. And so the NESCAC is often considered the little Ivy League. So everyone in our conference, we're all in New England. Everyone's high academic. It's a pretty cool conference to be a part of. Like there's a lot of rivalry in it. A lot of people will look at like all of the schools in our conference at once. We're all a little bit different. We're all high academic, but there are different standards among our schools. We're unique in that we're in Hartford, which is the capital of Connecticut. So we're definitely like a more urban school than a lot of other schools like us that are like really pretty schools, but more kind of out there. So, and my background really, like I have been at a bunch of all small, high academic schools. I always joke around when I'm recruiting people that like, I I wouldn't even know how to coach people that don't care a lot about school, that aren't stressed about getting A's and B's. So I've been in it for a while. The last place I was a head coach at was actually, I'm from the East Coast, but the last place I was a head coach at is St. Olaf College in Minnesota. So I'm a little bit familiar with some of the Midwest, but I've mostly been at a bunch of different high academic schools on the East Coast.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rachel. So I think I'm wondering if sort of each of you could tell us a little bit about what the process and the timeline of recruiting typically looks like for your sport and your institution. And so and Jamie, maybe I know you obviously work with the whole athletic department, but you can, you know, pick whichever sport you want. But Steve, do you mind starting telling us about sort of what does the process of recruiting athletes look like for you, and when does it begin?
Sure, I would love to start. So it's been a different world for me once I came to the D3 world, and you know, Division I, it's a totally different animal. But for us, we start. So like I said before, we start first with grades and classes and academics success. And then once we determine if a person kind of fits our mold of what we're looking for, we try to get them on campus by sometime the spring of their junior year. We cannot offer any type of commitment or anything like that. And D3 doesn't have scholarships. We don't have money, NIL money that we can offer out to people. But we can help, and a lot of the D3 schools can help with sort of admissions. Not, you don't want to call them spots. They're not guaranteed, and nothing's guaranteed in D3, but some help with admissions. Our schools are such that they're so highly academic that we don't dip our standards any. So the student athlete has to at least meet the standard that the normal student would meet. But once we determine that they do, then we try to have them out to campus in that spring of their junior year. By July of that summer, before their senior year, we usually make most of our offers to kids at that time. Most of our spots have to be determined by early decision. Most of our athletes have committed to us by then, which early decision typically is October 15th or so. Occasionally we'll get some students that we're hoping for a Harvard or a Yale or something like that, and that doesn't come through. So they come to us after early decision 1, and we do have an early decision 2 period that's right at the end of the year, 1st of January. And sometimes we can help get some kids in at that time. But most of our kids have committed to us by July or August of the summer. And I think most sports are similar to us. We'll typically have a recruiting camp or an ID camp that you probably have heard of. Some coaches do that, and they bring in 100 kids and try to make a lot of money for their program that way. We do it in a way where we invite only our top recruits. Typically, I'll have at the most 12 players come in, and we do that in June. And I'll usually make my offers right after that camp, sometime in early July. Each sport's kind of got a different calendar of events, but that's sort of the way we work. We can't offer before July 1st of each year. And I think the NESCAC, well, you can talk on the NESCACs, Rachel, but I think they may be August 1st. I'm not sure. I think that probably answers most of the questions on our time.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Rachel, do you want to talk about soccer at Trinity?
Yeah, it's actually not so different from a lot of what Steve is doing there. Same type of thing, like academics, like we have to make sure that someone is recruitable academically. I think one thing maybe I'll touch on, but like the time frame is pretty similar for us. It's pretty similar, I would say, for a lot of the team sports at Trinity and in the NESCAC. Like I think most of us in the NESCAC are trying to recruit through early decision 1. Some schools have early decision 2. Occasionally there might be someone come through regular, but pretty much like a lot of the team sports at Trinity are recruiting that way. Our pre-read or early read is basically what we do is like, we're recruiting someone. I'll watch someone when they're a sophomore, maybe if it happens if they happen to be at the same event and I have an open time slot. But mostly I'm trying to watch juniors, focus on juniors. They'll kind of visit throughout their junior year. We're allowed to do official visits or overnight visits beginning kind of like after January 1 of their junior year. So sometimes we'll invite people then. A lot of our recruiting, though, it happens through going to different showcases and tournaments. Occasionally, I'll go to like a high school game, but they would have to be somewhere like pretty local to me to watch them play there. And then the timeline pre-read, like what for us, what a pre-read means, and a lot of schools like us, is we need your transcript. So we'll do it the summer going into senior year. We collect your full unofficial transcript through junior year, your list of classes you're taking for senior year. We want to make sure, you have some APs, some honors, like you have good grades, all of those things. Some schools have like writing supplements or something. We don't have to do that at Trinity. We need your school profile, which is something you can easily find on your school's website. And then we're test optional, a lot of schools are test optional now. So if someone took their test scores, they'll give it to us. They don't have to submit them though. And so basically what happens for us is we submit it. It is July 1st in the NESCAC. So we submit it, we get it back on July. If we submit it before July 1st, we'll get it back on July 1st. And then basically what admissions does for us is they tell us as coaches if someone is admissible or not. And on our end, we find out like how much support would they need. And we can only use so much support on so many people in the class year. At Trinity, I don't have a roster limit. So I could recruit multiple people, like lots of people, but at some schools in the NESCAC League, they do have limits of how many people they could support, even if the person is really academically gifted and kind of above the standard. They can only have so many people. And so normally I have a good chunk that come like right after that July 1st deadline. I'll put out offers and hear back from them. And then I kind of have like throughout the summer more and more and more. And sometimes I try and keep open like 1 or 2 spots if possible by the time the school year starts, just in case, like kind of like what Steve said, sometimes there's someone who maybe applies early decision to a Division I school or like an Ivy League school, and then they don't get in, or maybe even another NESCAC sometimes for us. And then we hear late in the process, like, okay, I didn't get into this school, but I'd love to play on the team at Trinity. So then they might go through early decision too at Trinity.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. Jamie, do you want to talk a little bit about how it works at Marquette?
Yeah, a little different. So within Division I, there are recruiting rules as to when coaches can or cannot contact recruitable student athletes. For most sports, it's 6:15 after their sophomore year is the first time that you're going to start to receive recruiting materials, which are very restricted, telephone calls, but it is sport dependent. So every sport has a little bit of a different tweak on their rules. It's also legislated for us when you can come on official visits and when you can come on unofficial visits. So unofficial visits are visits that the recruit is paying for everything. So the school can't pay for anything. Official visits are where the university can pay for all of the visit type of thing. Unofficial visits. So on that note, if you do decide to visit a school early in your high school career, so your freshman or sophomore year, and you want to meet with a coach, understand that a coach is likely not going to be able to meet with you. So it is for unofficial visits for most sports, it's around 8-1 before junior year or 9-1 before junior year for your lacrosse. So if you do come on campus and show up in the athletic department, they're not trying to be rude. They literally, according to the rules, are not allowed to have discussions with you or meet with you or call you or anything like that. So a lot of coaches will put that on their outgoing voicemails. If you are, please let me know what age you are so I can determine whether or not I can call you back per NCAA rules type of thing. Same with off-campus contacts and things like that. As far as where our coaches are recruiting and kind of pulling recruits from, it's going to vary greatly by sport. At Marquette, we do have some sports that are non-scholarship at this time. So our tennis and our track are non-scholarship. So their recruitment process usually starts way later in a recruit's high school career. So you're talking junior year, maybe senior year. Our basketballs are getting commitments from kids, freshman year, sophomore year. They can't be announced officially until they're an official commitment. So a coach may talk to you about a verbal commitment where you're promising that you're going to go to that school. The school is promising that they're going to provide you with a scholarship or whatever it is. Please understand that a verbal commitment doesn't mean anything. It doesn't actually lock you into any type of contractual obligation to attend that school or anything like that. So you hear a lot of times about kids decommitting from a school and going someplace else. They're usually verbal commitments. Until you sign that scholarship letter, there is no longer a national letter of intent as of this year. So you don't sign a national letter of intent anymore. It's just a scholarship letter with that institution. You're not actually bound to that school, and that school is not technically bound to you. As far as getting recruited, I recruited myself to most of the schools, a lot of D3 schools and a couple of D1 schools, but kind of like the D3 coaches were saying, I went to a lot of ID camps where coaches saw me. I tried to seek out different opportunities where I knew coaches were going to be present at tournaments and guest play for different teams that were going to be going to those tournaments and things like that. If you look on a lot of coaches' social media accounts or their schools, team social media accounts, they actually will post where coaches are going recruiting. I know just recently our women's soccer were going to an ECNL tournament, I think in California or something like that. So we will post usually ahead of time that we're going to be at a certain tournament. But if you go back in the history, you can kind of see what the pattern of what tournaments coaches are recruiting at. If you want to try and get in front of a certain coach, I did have friends who played Division I and got recruited going to ID camps, but also remember that ID camps are a moneymaker for coaches, and maybe the coaches don't want to hear that me say that, but ultimately they are a moneymaker. And according to NCAA rules on Division I, ID camps, you will always see language on it that says open to any and all entrants. So they can't just restrict it to specific recruits or things like that. So if there is a coach you want to get in front of and you can afford to travel to North Carolina and go to their ID camp, that's fantastic. You'll get in front of that coach, which is great. But also understand that at those camps, coaches can't always have recruiting conversations with you. Again, that goes back to NCAA legislation on the Division I level as to when they can start those recruiting conversations. But if there is a specific school that you want to go to, I would say just contact them as much as you possibly can. I will also say, in my experience, just because you think you want to go to a specific school doesn't necessarily mean if you don't go there or play there, it's the end of the world. I thought I was going to Georgetown. I had a verbal commitment with the coach at Georgetown. He going into my senior year, he got fired at the end of the fall season. So he got fired in November. Back then, the signing period wasn't until February. So now all of a sudden there's a new coach and she didn't want me. Plain and simple. So I ended up reopening my recruitment. I ended up at Marquette. I had known the coaches, had previous history with them through, it used to be ODP, which I know is not as big of a thing in soccer anymore. But so just understand that, one, that's not always the worst thing in the world. And two, one thing that I've definitely learned when you are starting to look at where you want to go, the NCAA puts out all of these ads about what are you going to go pro in and how many of their players actually go pro in sports versus going pro in something else. The vast majority of student athletes don't go pro. So my advice, whenever I have recruits sitting in my office and my coaches at Marquette sometimes get on my case for it, is to basically say, go where you think you're going to get the best education for what you want to do. Do you want to be an oceanography major? Don't come to Marquette. We don't have that as a major. I had friends who on the soccer team who were education majors, and we have progress towards degree requirements that we have to hit. They got too far along in the process on that education side of things where they actually decided they wanted to be a nurse and go into nursing. Well, now none of their credits apply towards a nursing degree. So they finished their education degree and ended up going back to school after graduation to get a nursing degree. So just understand that on the Division I level, there are progress towards degree requirements. So if you aren't sure what you want to do, maybe don't go to a school where it's, very specific and something that you definitely have no interest in. I mean, there's no way I should go to someplace like MSOE because I have a hard time with my fourth graders reveal math stuff. And so engineering and math, not my forte, definitely not a school that I should attend. I also think student athletes, and our coaches talk about this all the time, should be realistic with where they are on a playing level. I played at USM. I had a lot of success at USM as, a women's basketball player. Most Division I schools weren't going to recruit me for Division I basketball. I mean, I had several MVPs, captain, it's all great and good. But there was no way I was going to go to a top 10 women's basketball school and, play on their team. I had offers from Division I schools as a walk-on. I actually was a walk-on the women's soccer team at Marquette. We were a top 25 team. So I spent a lot of time on the bench, but I knew I wanted to be at Marquette. I knew I wanted to go to law school there. I knew that's where I wanted my degree from. So to me, that was more important. And that's something that I definitely advise recruits now, where it's, where do you want that degree from? What is going to get you to the next step in life, but also give you the opportunity to play your sport and have fun and enjoy your college experience. So I think too often a student athlete will go to a specific school and they get injured or something happens. And now all of a sudden, maybe or there's a coaching change. That happens a lot. And now maybe they're dissatisfied and they're looking at the transfer portal. So.
Super helpful. Thank you, Jamie. I think for I wanted to ask sort of our next question is about kind of what you're looking for in prospective athletes. And so I think, I guess for Steve and Rachel, if you could talk about sort of, are there specific types of athletic talent that you look for? And then I wonder if you could also talk about, are there sort of other characteristics? You already mentioned kind of needing to have strong grades, a solid curriculum in high school, but are there sort of other characteristics that you look for in your recruits? Rachel, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first, I think I always say this, like we are looking for people who are athletic. Like, I think that athleticism, it is really important to be skilled at your sport. It is really important to be skilled at soccer if that's what you're interested in. But there's also a certain level of athleticism that you just have to play college sports, to play in certain conferences, certain divisions. Like you do have to have that. So, I say that because I think sometimes it's like as coaches we're like, oh, you have to work really hard, practice all the time. Like it isn't just the stuff that of just like trying hard. It is also stuff that like is intangible that you're just born with. So I think that's important to understand. But outside of athleticism, like of course we want people who are skilled. We want people who really love their sport. I think it's different in Division III where like we have a lot of restrictions about coaching our student athletes out of season. And so we talk a lot about in my team, like you do have to be like intrinsically motivated out of season. Like my season ended a few weeks ago and we give them like all these different resources. They have strength and conditioning coaches and stuff, but I am not allowed to coach them up until our spring season, which is like a very small spring season after our spring break. So they go months without a soccer coach. It's like a lot of them, their first time ever experiencing not having someone telling them, like their parents dropping them off at practice, them like having a coach, like they do have to do things a little bit on their own. So I think that type of thing, like trying to find someone who's like an actual like soccer junkie, like that they really do love their sport and they love trying to get better and develop, like that's something like I do look for. And the only way you sometimes know that is sometimes just like they're getting to know their recruit, but a lot of times just asking their coaches, like what they're like are they, do they seem like they're doing like the extra stuff outside of practice? I think also it is important, like we want to recruit people who do fit into the school, who do love the school. Like they're going to feel a lot of pride being there. It's not just about your sport. Like your sport is a huge part of your identity and it's going to be a big, big part of your career. But like there's a lot of other things that are happening at school. And so I want to make sure I'm recruiting people who like they're going to love their experience at Trinity, that they really like we're a pretty like that typical kid at Trinity is pretty social, pretty personable. And so like a lot of other schools like us, like when I compare it to some other places I've been, it's like they, you know, on like a Saturday night, there might be people in the library. And at Trinity, it is different. Like it's like they care a lot about doing well in school, but they also are a little bit more balanced than some other places I've been. Like they're not quite as like high strung and like quite as intense about school. But that also means like we want people who fit that too, like who like that, who want to be around people like that. Because I think then they're gonna like it. Like we don't want people who are gonna quit the team or transfer. Like we want people who are going to really like it, and I think that's also an important thing. So I try and tell my players, like, please share everything you can, like the good and the bad, about the school, about the coaches, like all of that stuff. And then one of the last parts that I can think of is that we want really good people. And so I will listen. Like now I've been at Trinity for 5 years. So everyone in my team are people I've recruited and I really do trust their opinion. So like it doesn't happen that often. Like there have been multiple people out there that they're a really good soccer player. I totally get along well with them. And then my players, whether they just end up like FaceTiming them because maybe they are from far away or they visit at some point. Like there have been multiple times where my players like, I don't know, Rachel, like something was off about her in whatever way. And I think like we'll say no to that person in the end, like, okay. And often it goes both ways. Like maybe it's just not the right fit, but I think like recruiting the right people that go along, like you really want to like get to know the team you're going to be a part of, the coaches, the school. Like a lot of things can change, coaches can leave, but like a lot of things are going to stay the same. And like the typical type of kid that is in that team is probably representative of people at the school. And so really want to make sure that, and I want to make sure like I'm recruiting people who are going to be happy. And we talk about the other thing I talk about with them is like, I never guarantee anyone playing time. And I'll be like, I'm really recruiting you because I think you're really good, but I don't know what you're going to look like when you come to play college soccer. Like it could take you 2 days to get adjusted. It could take you 2 weeks. It could take you 2 years. Like, I don't know what it's going to look like, but in the stage we're at, we're trying to recruit the best players that we can. So, I think like we have lots of conversations. It is like the soccer part and the talent part does really matter, but it's not more important than all of the other things I just talked about.
Thank you so much. Steve, do you want to talk about sort of what that looks like for you? What are you looking for in recruits, both athletically and sort of non-athletically?
Certainly. And I can echo almost everything Rachel said. A big part of Division III sports, and especially with tennis, I think is, we're not going to get the 6'5", 150-mile-an-hour server that wants to go to USC to come to Pomona Pitzer and play tennis. We're not going to have these crazy athletes. We're going to have 5'10" guys that want to work and want to play hard and love the sport, but that also are here for their education. I'd love to say that kids are coming here for me, but I know they're coming here for the schools and for the education they're going to get. And I totally agree with my recruiting here has evolved over the 10 years I've been here. When I started, I had come from a D1 school, so I tried to do it the same way I did at D1, and it didn't work. We cultivate our recruits for a while. I try to see them at tournaments. I see how they compete. The intrinsic things I look for are how much do they love being out there and competing? How much, if they're having a bad day, do they stay with it or do they want to get off the court? Tennis, I'm lucky in tennis in that there is a ranking system, and there's a easy way for me to sort of look at their results, and I can find out, if they sort of fit our mold of what we need for a player that's going to help us. But we also carry a big team. When I coached at D1, we had 8 guys on the team. When I'm coaching here, I have usually 16 guys on the team, and it's the same format. We don't need more players here, but we have more, so to speak. We need more players to fit our role, because in D1 it's a job. They have to get out and play every day. Here, I mean, I had last year a couple of matches where guys were speaking at a medical conference in Chicago and they couldn't play a match that we had against an important match, right? So, and I'm not going to stop that. That's their future, and that's what they want to do. Tennis is not necessarily second fiddle for them, but it has to be taken in perspective when you're at the D3 level. And we as coaches realize that, and we support that. The nice thing again about D3, I'm going up all over the place here, but we allow our kids, there's no problem to go study abroad for their junior year or for a semester in their junior year. D1, you would never see athletes do that. It's just very difficult. So that's a nice attribute for our kids. We encourage it. We want them to go do all these things that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Most of our kids, the ones we really recruit hard, have been to campus at least 2 or 3 times. When we're really serious about them, I make sure they come to campus and stay overnight with one of the guys on the team. They go out with the guys on the team. And you're right, Rachel's the same as us. We don't have a party school. They're not going out to go to the bars around campus. They go out to the library and study their AP exam while our students are studying for whatever they're studying. So it's a different type of social interaction, but that's what we want. We want students first, and athletes second. And I think they learn quickly. If they're not in that mode when they come to campus, they decide they don't want to be here. And like Rachel said, there's been often times when my guys come back to me and say, he's not a good fit and we don't want him. And culture for us is key. We want guys that have a good culture, that want to be here, that love the sport, and that are going to get better as they're here. Not as, we don't have the luxury of getting the prima donnas that come here and then relax. We have to get them better once they're here. So hopefully that answers that one.
Absolutely. Thank you. Jamie, could you talk a little bit about sort of when you're talking with coaches at Marquette, what, are there things that all of them, tell you that they look for in athletes, maybe sort of the intangibles, just because I know it's a lot of different sports, obviously, but sort of besides athletic talent, is there anything that's really important to being a student athlete at Marquette across sports?
I would say, just hearing what the Division III coaches had to say, thinking back to my experience, kind of what our student athletes are and kind of what our coaching staffs all are kind of about these days. Being a Catholic Jesuit institution, I think I like to think we're a very good balance of what you think of as that like super intense Division I, like your life is your sport type of thing, and also being understanding that they are students. And understanding that they are part of a greater community, that athletics is not just a silo, that we can't just keep to ourselves and things like that. We do try and make an effort for our student athletes, one, to be distributed amongst the general student population as far as housing. They might be living with another student athlete from their team, but they're in dorms with the general student population. So we definitely don't try to separate them. It is a bit more intensive as far as time demands than the Division III level. So our student athletes, we have a NCAA limitation of 20 hours a week when you're in season. They get 1 day off per week. And then it will flip to 8 hours when they're out of season. And out of season is really only a couple week period, usually between the end of fall and the beginning of spring. Most spring sports start up in January. Spring sports actually start up prior to us returning to school in January, but even the fall sports that are in their spring season will start their spring seasons in January. So, unlike Rachel was saying, kind of starting after spring break, they're kind of back at it right away. And if they're not in their 20 hours a week, they're in their 8 hours when they're coming back. And the coaches definitely use pretty much all 8 of those hours. It's we do try and, like I said, make a commitment at Marquette to have a community service aspect for all of our teams. We also want them to be students and enjoy kind of the college experience. One way to kind of get our student athletes out there, we have an internal competition amongst our teams for the Magis Cup. And student athletes get points for attending other sports teams. They get points for doing community service. They get points for going and speaking at events on campus. They get points for being a part of different organizations on campus, so mental health organizations and things like that. So we do try and make sure that our student athletes are integrating themselves into the larger community. But the long and the short of it is a lot of them are on scholarship, and this is kind of, they're not employees, so please don't quote me on that. But they are in some ways, getting paid to play a sport. So that is of a higher priority. Like Steve said about, going and doing a semester overseas, we've had very few student athletes who've been able to do that. Usually it's cross country or track and field, where their sport is split up into 3 sports. So they might redshirt, say, cross country in fall that year, but then still participate when they return in spring in indoor and outdoor track. So you do have to make some of those sacrifices as a student athlete on the Division I level, but you also get to compete against some of the best schools in the country. You do get to take some amazing trips sometimes. I know our women's soccer team is going to Italy in spring for a foreign tour. Women's basketball went to Italy and Greece a couple summers ago. Same with men's basketball. Lacrosse, women's lacrosse has been to Spain. Men's lacrosse, I think went to Canada. Don't quote me on that one. I can't recall that one. That doesn't seem like a great trip, but so there are obviously extra perks. Women's volleyball has gone to Prague and a couple other places in Europe. They're also a team that gets to charter their flights, which is kind of a awesome experience to make sure that you get back in time for classes and things like that. So while it is a lot of work being a Division I student athlete, there definitely are perks that go along with it. And we definitely look for student athletes who are not just athletes. That is something that our now outgoing athletic director has definitely stressed over the years. Wanting to make sure that we follow the Jesuit aspect of cura personalis and caring for the whole person. And being men and women for others is a part of the Marquette mission, and kind of being the difference is what we talk about, where again, I think we have a very good take on the fact that, yes, at some point athletics ends and you guys have to be excellent human beings. So how do we help you with that? Our academic programming very much follows that theme as well, trying to give student athletes opportunities in other areas other than athletics. So our coaches definitely do look for that when they're recruiting. And kind of like Rachel had said, we have had student athletes that we've been recruiting, and something comes to light. Someone sends us an email, hey, this is what really happened with this kid in high school, or this is why you shouldn't be recruiting this kid. And we do take that stuff seriously as well. Even if they're an amazing men's lacrosse player, we have stopped recruiting kids because of some negative history that has come to light. So like I said, I do think Marquette is in a very unique position, being a Jesuit institution, that we do take a lot of that stuff into account versus maybe some other high-level Division I schools.
Thank you, Jamie. And actually, that's a sort of a great pivot into, I'm wondering, Steve and Rachel, if you could also talk about kind of for high school students who are thinking about college sports, what what do you think are the biggest differences between being a student athlete in high school and what it will look like at the college level? What are some of the kind of maybe, more challenging parts of that transition that you've observed? Steve, do you want to maybe start?
There we go. Sorry. Couldn't find my mute button again. There is, I think, a huge level of competition difference between high school and college for tennis. Most of the guys we're recruiting are the best tennis player on their campus. So they're used to kind of being able to do their own thing. If they need to go play a tournament, their coach lets them go play. It's even though it's a team sport in high school, it becomes very individual with the sport of tennis because most of the guys are the best ones in that area. Once they get to college, now we've got 16 number one players from high school that are all vying to play in the lineup, and so they have to learn to be a teammate, and they have to learn oftentimes in a hard way as a freshman that your contribution this year might be to support other guys. You may not get to play that much. And that's a hard lesson to learn when you've been kind of the top dog for a long time. So that's probably the biggest thing that the kids have a tough time overcoming at first. And then again, that grit that we look for of guys that can just keep plugging in and day out and wanting to get better. Because there is there's still a big growth spurt with a lot of kids coming from high school to college. And so sometimes it takes a while for everything to come together and to where they start feeling comfortable and gaining the confidence. I mean, tennis, just like any sport, is based on how confident you are and how much fun you're having out there. And we'll have, you have guys that come in and they're coming in at a pretty low level. And by the time they're a junior, they've kind of done a lot of work in the weight room. They've gotten a little bit taller, and all of a sudden now they're hitting the ball twice as hard as they did when they came in. And now they're starting for us instead of playing a different role. But so we see that a lot. Tennis is a little unique in that it's an individual sport that turns into a team sport for 4 years of your life, and that's about it. In high school, some high schools don't even have team tennis, and some of the level is not quite high enough to really make it anywhere near like a college experience. But I think that's also the fun part about college tennis and getting the kids on a team and working together. So.
Thank you, Steve. And Rachel, did you want to add anything about that, the sort of transition for student athletes?
Yeah, I think that it's always like in soccer, it's everyone is a step faster. So if you're fast, if you're someone who a big part of you is that you're a really fast player, like you still might be fast in college, but everyone's going to be, instead of you being 3 steps ahead, now you're going to be 2 steps ahead. So it's like you have to adjust to that. Or if you're kind of like average speed, now you might be slower. And so you have to really figure out how to adjust to that. I think speed of play is a big thing in soccer. Like the game is just faster. A lot of times, and this is for soccer people, but like in club soccer and in club soccer specifically, it's like a lot of passing around in the back, and there's not a lot of like high pressure defense. And especially in the NESCAC and a lot of Division 3 schools and a lot of Division 1 schools, it's like really, really high pressure. So you can't actually pass as well. So sometimes it doesn't look quite as pretty. I think there's an adjustment to that. The refs certainly don't call as many fouls. So people just are stronger. They're stronger, more physical, and they're faster. I think skill-wise, it kind of just depends on a player's background. Like we have a mix of people. We have like some people who were maybe they played on a really, really good club soccer team. And they maybe were like the only player to go Division 3. And so that person might have a different type of adjustment because maybe like, well, they're used to playing at a really high level. But now some of the people they're playing with actually, like, that pass that they made that used to be look like a perfect pass, we're actually now realizing was 5 yards off because they're actually not playing with all of the same best players. Versus sometimes we'll have players that are from, like, maybe they were the very best player on a very average club team, and so they're adjusting in a different way too. So I think, like, there's different types of adjustments. I think the other thing that I have found is that, like, when you play high school sports or whatever, club sports, AAU, whatever it is, like, you kind of just go to practice, you play, you leave, like, you have fun. You don't, like, think about it and, like, analyze it as much. And for whatever reason, it's like you become a college athlete and you just analyze, like, every single practice and everything you do, and it's not healthy, but it becomes something that, like, just that's what everyone does. And it does take this really fun part of, like, whatever it is, like club sports or AAU, whatever it is, and then your high school sports where you're, like, with all of your best friends, but maybe the level isn't, like, super strong, but you mix it all together. So now it's like you have people who are really committed and really good, all, and they're also your best friends. And I think it just, like, creates this fun environment, but it's also, like, this adjustment of, like, you're starting to really grow up and think about, like, how well you're playing or how you can be better all the time. And so sometimes that can be a lot. Like, it can be, I think it can be way more stressful than high school sports. Not because it just, like, doesn't come as easy, but it's just, like, you're surrounded by, like, a whole different, like, level of competition and of standard. You have a coach where it's their full-time job is to coach and to, like, be, how can I make this team win? They're, like, there to help you get better. So it's just, there's more pressure. People put more pressure on themselves at probably whatever level they're in. And, like, I think that's an adjustment. Some school wise, like, it sort of just depends. Like, this high school is a really good school. Like, I think, my player, like, she's totally fine, like, doing well in school. It's, like, a good transition for her. Like, I don't think it's harder than high school, but it's still different. Like, it's just, you're around different people. If you go to a school that's in a different region of the country than you're from, like, you're going to be around different types of people. So there's, like, you could be home even though you've never been homesick before. Like, you might just be, you don't even miss home, you just miss, like, being around different, you're around different types of people. There's an adjustment factor to that. So I think there's all the things of just, like, being away and being independent for your first time ever. And I think that sometimes, like, plays a big factor into, like, how quickly someone can adjust to being good at their sport at the college level, is, like, all the other things that are happening outside of their sport.
Thank you so much. I think we're gonna do one more question and then just a reminder for audience members to please feel free to put questions in Q&A or in the chat. I guess last question is, I think all of you have sort of alluded to the fact that it is helpful for high school athletes to make themselves known to you. And I think, Steve, I assume that, like, UTRs are an important factor for tennis. I guess I'm wondering, what's the best way for student athletes to get noticed? Are there particular, should they be on X or Twitter? Should they be making a YouTube video? Sort of, what is the best way for them to get noticed? And then actually, we did have one question that was kind of about, is it important for a student athlete to, let's say, is there a problem with reaching out too early where their skills aren't yet sort of fully developed? Is there a risk that, you might not see their potential, or that they might reach out too early before they, have times or skills that would be really impressive? So I guess, so the question is sort of, I guess, that question, and then also kind of how should they best get noticed by college coaches? And Jamie, do you want to talk about for D1?
I would definitely say for D1, it's going to vary a little bit by sport. If you are an amazing men's basketball player, coaches are going to find you. Kind of along on the tennises and track, our coaches definitely start looking at rankings and at, time splits and things like that for You know, if you won state or things like that, definitely sending in your times. Those are less heavy on the videos and what have you, but kind of speaking to the soccers and the lacrosses. Lacrosse is a little bit earlier recruiting timeline than soccer's. Volleyball is a little bit earlier recruiting timeline than soccer's as well. But I think, you know, definitely the highlight videos come into play. If you do decide to go with a recruiting service, I would do your research and maybe ask around and find out where those recruiting services have placed student athletes in the past, and try and go with a recruiting service that has kind of placed student athletes at like schools or similarly situated schools. There's a very big difference, you know, even in men's basketball between Marquette and Presbyterian. They're both Division I, and that's great, but like there's a huge difference across the 325 Division I institutions out there, and on every different sport. So doing your research ahead of time and kind of knowing, you know, this is a school I want to go to. I think this is also a good fit for athletics. And then kind of trying to find out how does that coach that you want to get in front of do their specific recruiting. I definitely think, you know, emailing is the way to go these days. Our coaches are very busy. I do know that sometimes they will still get snail mail letters and things like that. That's usually a little bit different than the norm. Student athletes having YouTube channels or having a huddle profile or things like that, also kind of becoming the norm. But also realize if you're going to put together an hour and a half highlight video, a coach is not going to watch an hour and a half. You know, put together maybe your best 10, 15 minutes of things that you think are going to really highlight what you're best at, and try and go from there. Again, Division I is a very small community, and I'm sure even between Division I and Division III, the coaches community is very small. So finding out, you know, if you're sending the same thing to every single coach, you know, make sure that you have the coach's name spelled right, you have the actual university that they go to spelled right. You know, you're not sending something to, you know, Mr. Schrader, who's the women's soccer coach or whatever. We definitely have had recruits send things to the wrong name or the wrong school or what have you, and our coaches then go put that in the trash. So be careful with your mail merges if you're doing that for emails and whatnot. But I definitely, like I said, you know, look on that particular coach's social media, that team's social media, where their coach is going to be, how can you get in front of them, and if it is a school that you definitely think you want to go to, and it is a school that you definitely want to play for that coach, you know, maybe an ID camp is not the worst idea in the world.
Thank you. Steve, do you want to, any advice about how athletes should be, you know, get known in your program?
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of that, even for the D3 level. We, you know, email is the best way, and sometimes it takes a long time for me to get back to my emails because I'll get 20 or 30 a day. But the good thing with, and I don't know if every sport is like this, but with tennis, you can look at a team's profile now, whether it's through their website or through UTR or through now the USTA and WTN rankings. And you can know ahead of time whether you can fit in that program. You know, there's 330 something D3 tennis programs, I believe, which is crazy, right? But so that means that for every level you are in tennis, you probably can find a school to play. Ours may not be it. Ours, you know, we're a top 10 team, so we're not going to be able to recruit every player that thinks that they want to play at our school. So I think you can see that ahead of time. You can look at who's on the team and you say, okay, that's close to my level. Maybe it's a little higher than me, but I can at least write that coach. And those are the guys I'm going to respond to, and then make it easy for the coach. If you're really interested in playing for us, come find a tournament in LA and let me know that you're going to be there, and I'll try to come and watch. Or find a camp that's out here. There are camps that have multiple coaches, and I don't know if this is true with every sport, but there are a few camps on the West Coast, and quite a few more even on the East Coast, that have 30 or 40 coaches that are there, and they're watching players, and they're set up for that purpose as a showcase. So we'll attend those, and we'll pick out a few kids that we like there. But a lot of it, again, for us is seeing who's interested in us. If they're really interested, they're going to come visit. And then if they can find a place to play nearby, that's going to make it easy for me to see them play and recruit them further. Starting early is great for us. It doesn't matter if they're not quite developed. Because if they're on my radar, then I'm going to keep them on my radar. And if I see their ranking continuing to go up, that's going to make me more and more interested in them. And for a lot of D3 schools, showing interest in that school over a period of years makes it easier for us to get them admitted into the college as well. So, if they've been to visit 2 or 3 times, admissions is going to look at that person a little more welcoming than somebody I recruited on my own and has never even been to campus. Admissions is going to look at the other kid first. So we don't have as much pull. I can't just go to a tournament and say, oh, I want that kid. And admissions doesn't care. They still need to see that they meet all the standards that our schools expect. So the easier a player, a high school kid makes it for us, I think is better. And then being persistent. I mean, I'll have, one email is not going to do it a lot of times. I'll send back a form email back to them. I'll say, stay in touch with us, and then hit me again in a couple of months, and keep hitting me if you're really interested, because those are the ones that start getting through the 50 emails a day, right? So I think that's a good thing to think about too.
Yeah, sort of the persistence and making it clear the fit of the school.
Right.
Rachel, did you have anything that you wanted to add? And I guess, Rachel, I know with soccer that showcases are kind of a big thing, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about those as well.
Yeah, so first off, I would say like in my team, because I think it's really important for people to understand, like, you feel like everyone around you is being recruited, and like their parents are talking about like they have this offer and this offer, but like most of the time, as Jamie said, like people are recruiting themselves, like they're being really, really proactive in it. In my team, I would say probably less than a quarter of them are people that I reached out to first. So probably over 3/4 of them in some capacity reached out to me first. Now in soccer, what happens is like I sign up to go to a showcase, and then on the website, like the girls that are going, their teams that are going, like they can see the 100 schools that are going to that tournament, and then they'll just reach out to whatever schools they want and say, hey, coach, like I'm interested in Trinity. Can you watch me? Like, would love for you to watch me play. So when I'm going to a showcase, then I build my schedule around all of the people that write to me. And then from there, like so I might have all of my every time slot filled, but maybe I'm watching this one team, and then in soccer, like I'll get like a brochure from their team managers or something. And then I might have the brochure for the other team, which is exactly what happened actually with the player that is from USM. I was really watching the other team. I saw this other brochure, this girl I liked. I looked down, her GPA was good. Like she looked like, had a lot of the things that I felt like, oh, okay, this person could probably academically looks like maybe she could be a good fit for Trinity. And if she cares a lot about academics, then maybe also she would also be interested in Trinity. So then like I leave that showcase, and I've evaluated maybe 40 kids that all wrote to me first, but then I leave that tournament and I've written down like 40 other names of people that I'm going to now reach out to separately. And so of the 40 names, sometimes only, 3, 4, or 5 kids get back to me total. And sometimes there's some sort of connection or whatever, like, and for her, it was like, oh, actually one of my best friends in my club team is going to another school in your conference. Like I've never heard of Trinity, but I know she's going to this other school in your conference. So I think like that type of thing is really important. So the other part, like the way we have we have limited budgets. I can't go to everything. And so for me to recruit someone, we're in Connecticut, to recruit someone from Wisconsin, like that can be really hard. What we do is I choose to go to the top tournaments in the country. There's like 2 leagues to choose from, and I go to a bunch and not all of them, but I go to some that I can. And so then I see lots of kids, like it might be an event in California, but the kids are from all over the country. So I might see a kid from Wisconsin and California. But then there's lots of kids who they don't play in those teams. And so, but they're from Wisconsin. And so the only way for me to see that player play is for her to come to an ID camp. And so ours, like, and I think I will say for a lot of small schools, like they really are beneficial. Like I just had this, we just emailed it today, like a mass email to everyone in our database. Like if our winter ID clinic of my current first year class, there's 11 of them. 6 of them came to a winter ID clinic. So it wasn't necessarily, including the USM player, it wasn't that she came to that first for her. I had seen her play, and then I told her, okay, if you're really interested, like we liked you there, you could visit and you could come to this ID clinic, and it would be a way for us to see you play a second time. And that was it. And that's like basically how we recruited her. But sometimes there will be someone like we've never seen them play. They're from California, they're from Texas, like we're never going to see them, we're just never going to cross paths. And so they have to come to an ID camp. It doesn't have to even be ours. Sometimes it could be like a big one, like Dartmouth does a big one. And so sometimes we'll see them there. But in some capacity, like we just have to figure out, like we don't have a ranking system, and there are plenty of kids out there who they don't play on like the team that they have to pay tons of money for, or they just can't travel, or they play lots of sports, so they're not going to be on that. So there's no way for us to see them play unless they find a way to get in front of our face. And so I will say for small schools, ID clinics really are really helpful for recruiting, but it's still hard. Like you still have to be the best kid at the clinic to be like, there's some clinics we don't recruit anyone out of, and there's some clinics we might recruit 2 or 3 players out of. So no matter what, like you still have to show that you're good, and that you'd be a good fit. But even by coming to that specific coach's camp, like if someone comes to Trinity, like I know that they are like super interested in Trinity, as opposed to when I go to this event and I can tell like this kid probably wrote to 20 schools, that's fine, but the odds of me getting her are really slim, versus a kid who comes to our ID clinic, they probably have like a lot of interest. So it's kind of like, it's helpful in that way to know how interested someone is. So showing your interest level, I think, is one of the biggest things. Like we don't know how interested you are. The last thing I always say this at my ID clinics in our like little recruiting spiel is like, especially like at our level, like if you're being recruited, you will know you're being recruited. They will say they are recruiting you. And if you're unsure, you're like, I think they were at my game. Did they see me play? Like, and they don't reach out to you, like, and you keep asking them like, hey, do you think I'd be a good fit? And they never respond, or, they just keep saying, I just keep needing to see you play more and to see you play more. Like eventually you have to either like you do have to read between the lines or just move on to another school. And there are so many good schools out there. Just like there's so many good soccer players, like there's so many good schools. And so like try not to get so dead set on one place, but like you will know if you're being recruited. And if you're not sure, just ask the coach, and the coach either will tell you yes or no, or if they don't respond, then you just move on.
I think that's great. That's really great advice, Rachel. And I know we have gone over our time a little bit, so I'm really grateful for the sort of extra few minutes. And I think we've actually been able to answer most of the questions in the Q&A. So I think I just kind of wanted to close it out by again thanking our panelists for these really amazing insights. This has been so helpful, and for our students and parents who are attending, I think please know that the athletic department, the college guidance office, we are here to support you if playing sports in college is something that you think you might want to do. And I think just want to reiterate sort of some advice from our panelists, which is that, you know, it's really important to be a strong self-advocate in the process, to, you know, seek feedback from your current coaches and people who are familiar with your play, and figure out sort of, you know, what are good places that where you might be able to compete, and places that are also going to help you reach sort of your long-term goals. So finding colleges that are a good fit for you, not just athletically, but also academically and socially, and that will be a financial fit for your family. So I just want to say thank you so much again for joining us, and thank you to our panelists, and I hope everyone has a great evening.
Thank